Our next level of evolution is to recognize we're all cells in a larger organism coming together to share awareness. I'm sharing my awareness with you, you're sharing your awareness with me. We are not humans until we all come together and have the synergy of awareness. Then we create the superorganism called humanity. We're only humans when we create humanity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of First Contact. So today we have Alan Steinfeld here with us today. Now, Alan Steinfeld is an author. He's also a researcher. He's a speaker. He has a big background in these alternate realities and extraterrestrials. So, Alan, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, it's always nice to be part of First Contact whenever and wherever that happens. So thank you.
Exactly, yes. We're very much on a mission to put the process of contact and disclosure into the hands of the people instead of the hands of the government. So a lot of people ask me, well, what about disclosure? And I think, well, you know what? You can have disclosure, you can connect. And I think that's part of what some of your work is relating to as well. Mm-hmm. Now, you've written the book, Making Contact. Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Well, first I want to say that disclosure is in the hands of the people because the government is never going to understand what witnesses and contactees already know. It's not about technology. It's not about developing weapons. That's all the Pentagon is interested in is how do these things work? How can we make them to make more weapons and kill more people, basically, or protect, whatever. But, so I think the phenomena, whatever that is, because there's so many different points of view about what actually is going on. And I think no one has the definitive statement about that. Is deciding, in a sense, how it's going to unfold, which gets back to why I wrote the book. It's a collection of essays by the best and brightest people in the field, people who I've studied under and learned from and heard about how they think about things. People like Linda Moulton Howe is in the book. Do you know Linda?
Yes.
She's one of my favorites. And Whitley Strieber, who wrote the definitive book on abductions, I feel. I mean, there's Betty and Bonnie Hill, there's, Travis Walton, there's Whitley Strieber, who gave us the face of the ET. So he gave me an essay, JJ and Desiree Hurtak, who make the bridge between the spiritual and the 3D, 4D, 5D realms of the ET. So all these people, Nick Pope, who worked for the Ministry of Defense, wrote the first chapter in the book from a very government linear point of view. So I wanted a book that someone who didn't know anything about the phenomena could be brought in slowly. And, you start with Nick, who says, yeah, the government doesn't want to tell you these secrets for this, this, and this. And then we get into the researchers like Grant Cameron, who says, if you've seen a UFO, you are part of the phenomena. There are no innocent bystanders. Either you're part of it or you're not until you become one. So the book is an arc from the external to the internal, people like you who've had these contactees. So I start with people who are strictly observers and commenters to the actual experiencers who are the people we should talk to about disclosure, because it's already happened for them. It's already a part of their psyche. And I think more and more people are having contact now. And so that's why the book has been successful in some ways, because people want to know what's happening to them. And the mainstream want to know, well, who are these whistleblowers coming out? What are they talking about within a worldview that doesn't include this phenomena? So that's sort of the cognitive dissonance that happens for people. Wait, what? A friend of mine has a podcast called Wait, What? It's like, how come this is not our history books? How come this is not everyday knowledge? It's because you go back to the Catholic Church, Galileo said, we're changing the worldview. The earth is not the center of creation. We're part of a bigger creation. And that took 300 years for the church to forgive Galileo. I hope it doesn't take 300 years for the people who are qualifying reality, like the media and the government and all those politicians, to make the understanding that we're not alone in the universe. So that's sort of a long answer to your question.
Yeah, I love that. I think we're very aligned in our philosophy around this idea of contact. If somebody asked me, when is disclosure happening? I would say the same thing. Well, for me, it happened 10 years ago. So when's it going to happen for you, right? Depending on your intentions and your desire and your actions that you take. And I believe that contact it can be a learned process. I mean, this is something I've experienced with some of the work that I do. I've done quite a bit of mentoring work, coaching, healing, spiritual mentoring, and I teach people how to connect. So if it's a learned skill, like riding a bike, well, your disclosure is when you choose it, So,
well, can I ask you, how do you do you do a CE5 thing? I don't want to interview you because you're interviewing me, but I'm just curious because everyone connects in a different way. Could you just give me a little snapshot?
Yeah, totally. I haven't done the GRIA CE5 protocols. I found my own ways of connecting more through channeling and meditation. It did start off spontaneously for me. So in terms of the process, I was activating my Merkaba Lightbody, which is something that I now teach in my programs. So through the process of activating that on a consistent basis, I was able to open up my crown chakra, open up my third eye, to the point where I was able to channel. And through that channeling process, I met Arcturian beings, Pleiadian beings as a starting point, and then many, many more. And then I then learned another technique, which was how to access the multidimensional inner heart. And when I learned how to do that, that's when a lot of other stuff opened for me as well, combined with the Merkaba Lightbody activation. So between those two processes, the activation of the light body and then entering the inner heart gateway, I was able to learn how to connect with anything in the universe. So that's when I realized that we are multidimensional beings, and all you have to do is access it through the heart.
Thank you for that. That is a great explanation. And I think what you're saying, and I believe this, that these beings are already heart-centered. I mean, the ones that are coming there. And obviously, they're not interested in taking over our planet, which is sort of the propaganda we hear. They're going to invade, be aware, be afraid. And it's not about fear. If you're in fear, you're never going to really make that connection to these beings, right? I mean,
Well,
that.
exactly. And my experience of it is I've healed from them. The first group of beings that came through for me was actually the Arcturian Council. And the first thing they gave me was a set of sacred geometries for healing. I mean, if they were here to destroy the planet, why would they be teaching me how to heal the people? It just doesn't make any sense. So yes, I think there's a lot of agenda out there, and I don't want to put a lot of focus into it, but I think there is a lot of agenda out there to sort of distort the view of what it's really like. And the reality is, I mean, if they wanted to destroy or conquer Earth, they would have done so by now. I mean, they're not exactly, unable to do that. So, you probably come across in your research, Alan, the stuff that happens around nuclear sites and how they're able to just turn things on and off at will. It's like if they were going to do something, they would have done something, and they haven't. So maybe we need to be open to this idea that it's about connection, and there is a very positive agenda in all of this as well.
But you do have to take into account the fact that some people have been traumatized. So, I mean, and abducted and genetically taken to, and their genetics have been taken. So it's like my book says, it's a span of activity. It's levels of ETs. It's not one type. There's a lot of people, and myself, I write my chapter in my book, maybe I'll send that to you, where I think I was taken and genetic information extracted. And it was, I think, beyond trauma, because a lot of it was blocked out. And I think I want to remember more, but there's a part of me that maybe doesn't. But that experience sucked me down the rabbit hole, says, oh my God. And maybe that's why it happened this way. I want to know everything I can about the phenomenon. I want to meet everyone. who knows what they're talking about. So I've, since I guess 87, I've been to every conference. I've been to, I mean, you know, around the world, there's a lot. I didn't go to every single one, but I met like people like Bud Hopkins, John Mack, you know, these people, David Jacobs, Jacques Vallée. I mean, these people who are really, Linda Moulton Howe's a good friend. And, you know, you go to enough conferences, you start to go out to dinner, you start to meet. So I called them up. I said, Linda, you want to write a chapter in this book? She said, yeah. So that experience though got me, you know, my little, I think it was probably an abduction type thing. I think I've had them since I was a child though. I used to see faces at the window, like strange faces. I used to have out of body experiences. Some of those were traumatic. So I also, and maybe it's like that way for you as star seeds. We're always felt a little different than, you know, I never liked team sports. I liked individual sports. You know, I just felt like there was my family, very nice people, but very normal, very regular, you know, very, you know, they're still pretty regular. My father, though, was a little more open. He had some out of body experiences, and that gave me permission to jump in, you know, full force. Like, I want to know what's going on here. I'm not here to just make money or, you know, do all the normal thing. I mean, it's great to make money. I'm not, you know, we need that. But, you know, I knew there was something else going on. And I studied philosophy and the mystics and had a experience with a channel that really opened me up. You know, it's like, I thought, you know, in the early 80s, thought channeling was kind of, no one heard of channeling. I mean, there was Jane Roberts, and that stuff is really fantastic. You know, Jane Roberts, Seth Speaks. Never heard of it?
Oh,
That was
yes,
the,
yes, I do. Yes.
and
Oh,
before
wow.
that, there was Edgar Casey would channel his higher self. But in the 80s, when I kind of awoke to that, it was the kind of the new, it's called the New Age in the 80s, the Aquarian Revolution, the Aquarian conspiracy, and people were into channeling. I saw one, I thought this woman must be crazy. And then it's like, wow, there's something going on here. That was a shift for me that then led me to other things, other mystical writings, right? And I think there's something real to mystical traditions.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of crossover between some of those things and then what people are experiencing now as well. Actually, I'm very curious, you know, about some of your experiences with being taken, because I have heard from people that yes, you know, this genetic testing happens. I've not personally experienced it. I'm probably glad that I haven't personally experienced it. And
Mm,
one of the questions that I have around it, you know, even though it can be quite traumatic for some
mhm,
people, I wonder if it's something that we've agreed to, because something that I know, and this is what I've been constantly told from my guides, the beings that I connect with, is that everything that we experience on some level has been chosen. You know, even the negative experiences, even if you come here and you have a negative
mm,
experience, on some level, there's a co-creation or an involvement in that
mm.
process. And so while it can be very, very traumatizing for someone who's maybe not consciously aware of it, I do wonder if some of those experiences have been orchestrated from, say, higher self level, and it's only traumatic because you don't know or you've forgotten that you've agreed to it. What's your opinion on that?
Well, that is a great question. And I have to say, there are two very distinct camps around that issue. There's people like Bashar and other people say, no, you agreed to this abduction and, you know, this is part of your destiny and all that. And then there's other people say, well, I may have agreed to it back before I incarnated, but right now I'm saying no. I'm saying no, I don't care what you say. I mean, because you can use that excuse to any awful thing that happens to someone. You agree to that, you know, children starving in Africa, they agree to. I mean, maybe that's true, but it doesn't mean you
It
can't
doesn't make
change
it
it. So,
okay. It doesn't make it okay. And I think
no, it doesn't
that's
make, and you can change it. You can say, well, maybe. So there's like people like Marina Seren. She is a big, do you know her? She's come out and say, no, I don't want to have alien hybrid children. Margarita Rigoletto, she's also saying, say no to abductions. It's kind of split the world. I have to say, maybe it wasn't pleasant, but something about it opened my mind up to a whole other paradigm of thinking about reality. So even though maybe it was traumatic, and probably still is because I haven't even realized all of it, it shifted my perception. And it does that for a lot of people. So it's a kind of internal contradiction in a way, even for people like Whitley Strieber, who's, you should read Communion if you want to read a dramatic, one of the best books about the abduction scenario, or even John Mack's book, Abductions. You know who John Mack was, right? John Mack, and Bud Hopkins was one of those early original. So I think it's an individual case. Yeah, I think you can say, if you're aware that it's happening, say, no, okay, I agreed to it and I'm not agreeing to it now. Or maybe there's a part of me that says, okay, this is how I can open up to a greater level. So I don't have a definitive answer because I can identify with both things. Yes, right. I maybe did agree to it, and it did shift me, and it did take me into something that I sort of made a career out of. This, the whole phenomena, whether good, bad, or ugly, is the most interesting thing that's happening on planet Earth right now. This shift between isolated, Darwinian version, and where a freak of nature and life came out of a little puddle of amino acids, to the fact that we descended from the gods, from the higher realm. So, that's the paradigm shift we're in. Life is a freak of nature, has no meaning. And the higher one is like, yes, life has meaning. Everything you do is here for a purpose. And it comes down to what Jung said: is the universe a friendly place or not? And so this old mechanistic paradigm of materialism has gotten the world into a really awful mess of pollution, destroying the environment. What's the difference? Nothing matters. Why do we care? We're just here, collect more things, and then, off. So obviously there's a reality that that's not true. There's more than a mechanistic dimension here. There's multiple dimensions, and consciousness, has sort of replaced the word for God in a way. It's all consciousness. So it's like, so this has become the shift, even among UFO people, even among the old time experts, the nuts and bolts people like Grant Cameron said, it was just nuts and bolts. And then it's like, boom, the light went on, and he said, no, it's consciousness, all about consciousness. And what does that mean? Well, we don't really know what it means. What is the consciousness of these ETs, where even if you're channeling or tapping in, and this is what Bashar says to Daryl Anka, you're only seeing 5% of what this ET reality really is on a human level. So we're waking up to the fact that the world is not just material. And I think that's a big part of why the ETs are here, and people like you are having experiences to show that we're here because life does have meaning, and there is a soul, and we are eternal, and we're here to be the best version that we can be, and be kind and be aware. And if you've done something unkind to somebody because of unconsciousness, make amends for it, apologize, see that we're here on an evolutionary karmic path in a way to be the bodhisattvas. You know what that means, right? The bodhisattva. Yes. And I think that makes more sense. And that opens up the realm that no, ETs are not here to take over our planet, because what do they want here anyway? All they have to do is manifest it. And but I think they want us to grow up, I think that's also why after 1947 and the drop of the atomic bombs and all this, all these vehicles over atomic sites, I think you said, they say, no, you're really doing something dangerous there, not just to your planet, but to the dimensions that connect to your planet. You're ripping holes in time space, and that's not nice for our neighboring universes. So it's like that. So yes.
Well, and I think one of the big themes that's unsaid but said in this conversation is this idea of free will, even with the abductions. Well, is
Yeah.
there an element of free will? And sometimes I think people struggle to understand the idea that on one level we choose something and in another level it seems like we're not choosing something. And where is that free will? Like if your higher self decides to have an experience and then Earth you says, well, actually, I don't want it. You know, I mean, do you get to have a say in that? My experience is that to some extent you do get to change the timeline even after coming to Earth. I think things aren't predestined permanently. I think there's a level of predestiny in terms of you come to Earth, you agree to certain things, and then once you get here, you can change things, you can change plans, you can change direction, you can change experiences. And I think this is where this idea of conscious creation comes in. Now, what I find interesting in that is some people have taken that to the extreme as well with the whole law of attraction manifestation. I'm going to have whatever I want. It can get a little bit entitled, you know. So I think there's definitely a spectrum in this. What I find very curious is just all these different camps of people who I think all have truth to some degree, but I think, and this is just my speculation, I think the truth is somewhere in the combination of all of that.
Well, I think the truth has not been actually found out. I don't think the full extent, I don't think we're actually maybe even intellectually or maybe spiritually developed. I mean, I think we have the potential, but to know the truth of the realities that these beings live in, because we're, even if you're, channeling whatever from fifth dimensional, you're still very brainwashed to see a very small part of reality. And I think the truth is a progression. I don't think there is the truth. I think there's a progression of truth. But I also want to acknowledge you because you're very right about the free will issue. And that's one of the oldest spiritual kind of debates in history. Not even about UFOs or any, it's just about, well, is it all predetermined? Is it all free will? Is it and I think maybe you are right that we do have a choice in the moment, and we have to keep checking in to be the best version of ourselves we can be as conscious as we can be. And when we do that, we actually change timelines, and we shift the reality, and we open up other possibilities. So there is free. I mean, some people say the multiverse has infinite amounts of timelines, and we're on one, and you can choose that one and make the choices on that one. But when we decide, and it's a work in progress, to be the most conscious, I think, kindest, compassionate people, and that is something I am constantly learning. How can I be nicer, more aware, more available? It's, what my favorite movie is the Groundhog's Day, right? Groundhog's Day. You've seen that?
Yeah.
The moral of that story for me is we keep repeating the same thing until we decide that we're here for everyone and ourselves. Bill Murray learns to play the piano. He also catches the kid falling out of the tree. He gets off that karmic wheel when he goes 100% into being there for himself and everyone, not just for everyone, but not just for yourself. There's that old Kabbalistic saying, if I'm just for myself, who will be for me? If I'm just for everyone, who will be there for me? So it's always this balance of karmic stuff. And so I think if we can help each other be more conscious, saying, you just went unconscious there, you just did that. I mean, I had a teacher that he lives in Australia, actually. He'd say, did you see how you talked to that waiter? Did you see what you did there? I mean, it gets a little intense, but he was so present that you'd have to stop and think about everything you were thinking. There was no room for going unconscious and saying, oh, did I say? Because every moment there's so much to be aware of. It's so, it's like, what does Eckhart Tolle say? The power of now. Yes, it's in the power of now. And when you're in the power of now, and that's not easy, but it's possible. It's simple, but not easy. Then what's really here, I think in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, when you're really present, everything else is known. Not that I'm a follower of Jesus, but there's some good things he said. But so it's like when you're present, totally, you start to see the melting of reality. This is what happens in Joe Dispenza's workshop, where reality starts to vibrate, and you start to see, because you're so your senses become so acute because you're pushing the present moment. And that's like getting away from neurotic and logical and, thoughts and fear and all the things that keep us stuck in the left brain. When you can combine the left and right brain and be present with both, you become a whole brain being that can start to see through the dimensions. Did that answer your question? I forgot what the question was, but did that answer?
Absolutely. No, well, I think we're going on a lot of different angles here, which is amazing, and yeah, lots of new conversations opening up. One of the things that piqued my interest was when you said about the Groundhog Day, the movie, right? Now, I've had a real life experience of Groundhog Day where I actually I saw something happen in a dream. I'm going to say dream, vision, whatever you want to call it. So I had this kind of dream that I was having this experience, and in that experience, I saw a conversation playing out. And 2 weeks later, I found myself having that exact experience. Now, what happened in the dream was exactly like Groundhog Day. So I saw myself having this conversation, observing this situation, and then suddenly it was like everything hit pause, and then all the people that were in that scenario went back up to some higher plane, wherever it was. And then we were having a conversation. And in that conversation, we're saying, well, why don't we do it like this? And then we tweaked it a little bit. So we changed the situation because we wanted to shift it into a slightly different permeation or a different type of experience for the purpose of lifting the vibration and shifting to a higher timeline. That was the intention behind that. So we said, if we do it this way, maybe it'll be better. So then fast forward 2 weeks, this was actually in Peru. I was visiting Lake Titicaca doing some planetary grid work as I do. And I was there with a friend. And now he went up and started talking to this guy. He was one of the people on the side of the street. He was selling something, or I don't know. He started having a conversation with him. Now I was out of earshot. So I was about 2-3 meters away. It's out of earshot. And also they were talking in Spanish. I don't speak a word of Spanish. But in that moment, I had this deja vu flashback to that vision or dream that I'd had a couple of weeks prior. And so I knew what the conversation was. I could comprehend what they were saying without me understanding it. So when this friend of mine walked back to me, I said, did you say this? And then he said this, and then you said this, and he said this. And he's like, how'd you know? And I was like, well, I dreamt about this 2 weeks ago. And we said that this is what was going to happen. But in that scenario, it happened in this way. And this time it was slightly different. So I actually saw that Groundhog Day playing out in real time with conscious awareness that that's what was happening. And I thought, wow, there must be something in that.
Yeah, no, I think that is fantastic that you had that experience, because it shows that, well, you're pretty evolved, and that maybe you're right, and you're seeing a glimpse into parallel realities that exist. It's just proof that there are these dimensional spaces, and we can shift the timelines. And I think, someone who's aware like you, because of your experiences, can teach that to others, actually, and say,
Well, this is the idea behind this podcast and everything we do. Alan, I'm actually very curious to ask you this question. I've been eyeing in your book, you've got the tagline, preparing for the new realities of extraterrestrial existence. What does that preparation look like?
Well, that's a good question, because actually that wasn't my subtitle, but the publisher wanted it. And it took me a long time to realize what this book is about. Is telling somebody something's out there. If you're not aware that there are UFOs or ETs, I mean, I have a really embarrassing story to tell about that, but I'll tell you because. So I'm sitting in my apartment, and there's this window I write in front of, and there's plants around, and I'm there alone, and the lights are out, and then I hear a little movement, in the house there, and it's like in the apartment. It's like I think, well, maybe someone's there or something like that. And then, I'm getting a little freaked out because I know I'm all alone. And suddenly I see these two little black eyes staring at me. And I go, huh? And then I look a little closer and it's a little mouse. And, if I was prepared to say, there's a little mouse in there, but, it just shocked me. The sentience, the consciousness, even though it's very probably limited, it's just like, there's this being looking at me, and it's like, it was shocking. But if someone would have said to me, you might have a little visitor and don't worry about it, it's okay, then it's like, it wouldn't have been that weird. I mean, those things happen. I've gotten rid of that by now from my apartment, but, it wouldn't be so shocking if someone says, there might be some beings showing up, look out for them, or this is what they look like, or this is the kind of transmission you might get. So people are shocked. I mean, if they're weren't prepared, that's something might happen, so that's why the subtitle is preparing, because I give an overview of all the different possibilities of how these things, these beings, these craft can show up. So people aren't shocked. There's a little bit of like, oh, I read about this in the book. And, there's a lot of people who are still shocked, but, it's less and less because it's out in the news. The US government's coming out and saying, oh, really? Because we grew up in that very limited worldview. And so by presenting this book among thousands of others, but I really wanted to make sure this was an arc of possibilities. So it's not one thing, it's many, many things. So that's what I got from the subtitle, Preparing for the New Realities of Extraterrestrial Existence. And this is a new reality to include, we have enough problems just with people with different color skin. Imagine if they don't look anything, or if they're not even, physical, if they're, so the preparation is opening up the mainstream, because I think maybe this book is a sort of crossover into the mainstream. People who were brought up very limited in their, worldview and their education and what they think reality is. And suddenly, I'm not saying it, the government is saying, it's in front of US Congress saying, we're not alone in the universe. And I think these beings look like your typical gray. This is what David Grush said, not in front of Congress, but he said it in other places. They are biologic. There are beings on these craft, and some of them don't look anything like us. So that's a shock. If you've lived your whole life laughing at the subject, saying these people are idiots, they're crazy, they're lunatics, they're making things up, suddenly the world is taking it seriously. So how do you prepare for that? What can I know? I mean, and in a way, it's not going to make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. They're going to go about just like when Copernicus in 1200 whatever said, the earth is not the center of the universe. People said, okay, that's nice, and went about their business. But this is a much bigger shift in reality, because it's not so much the ETs. I always say, well, and it's their technology, but in a good way. They're not filling up their gas tank, with petrol to get here from wherever they're coming from. If they even are coming from someplace else, that's one thing. Maybe it's a chance for the world to get off of fossil fuel and stop polluting. And, of course, that's what the very thing the governments are afraid of. Just imagine the awful bomb you can make if it's free energy. So I think it's that, but there's also the fact that the world is a lot more complex, and we are a lot more complex, because I think these beings are asking us, and maybe in your work, to raise our vibration so we're not making war, and meet us at the level in which they exist. They're not, like, if you're talking to a lower form of consciousness, not that I want to make a judgment there's lower and higher forms, but if you're talking to your dog, you're not going to bark at it to communicate. You're going to talk in your language, and that's, it's not that we're lower or higher, but we're definitely less evolved, vibrationally. But we have the potential. We definitely have the potential. I'm not saying a dog has potential to speak our language, but they do have the potential to understand. But we do have the potential to meet these beings, because on a soul level, we're equal to them. I think. I mean, I think that's the thing we have to fall back on and get out of the fear and say, yes, we can meet them on an even playing field.
Absolutely. I think you've really made a powerful point here, because I think a lot of people do look at it as in very hierarchical terms. So they think that, well, these beings are superior, and yes, maybe technologically, societally, maybe they've got a few things worked out. Maybe medically, they know about healing and things that we're still figuring out. But at a soul level, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head, that we are just like them. And I think, again, going back to that awareness of multidimensional self, when we realize that we are all of that, then suddenly it's like meeting our peers, like welcoming our old family back home into our hearts and saying, hi, it's been such a long time. And there's no fear, there's just love, there's remembering, there's a recognition of that soul frequency. And I think that's, that, to me, that's the preparation. I mean, my next question is, if we're leading towards, I mean, I feel this is the vision for a lot of us in this space, we're creating a vision towards interplanetary peace, right? That's the sort of end of
Well,
all of
not only interplanetary, planetary peace, first.
Exactly. Well, that's included. I think that's a given. And I think it comes back down to, well, what do we need to do as human beings in our evolution to have this experience of interplanetary peace, which then, of course, the effect of that is our planet and our people are also in harmony with each other, with the environment, with ourselves. What is it going to take to get to that point?
Well, it's going to take what we're going through now, the end of wars, perhaps, the compassion for people who may be seen our enemies, and realizing that we are multidimensional, that there is a soul, that we are eternal, that life is an emergent property of creation. It's not a freak of nature. This is still the old paradigm, the Darwinian materialistic paradigm, that life is, spontaneous. It doesn't. And I say no, and lots of people like us say, no, there is higher reasons. There's the soul that is forever, and so when we start to understand that way of thinking, and it's just belief systems, there's belief is just a kind of programmed education that people have. You have to I call belief make believe. You have to make yourself, or someone makes you believe it. But the truth, when you know something, it's not about belief. Gnosis, the term gnosis, the Greek term gnosis. Well, the gnosis is a direct knowing of reality. It's not about belief at all. So when you have an experience, like I'm sure you have, you're not believing this. You may believe aspects of it, but you know that it's a reality. So what it takes, I think, I end my book with the epilogue by Bruce Lipton. Do you know Bruce Lipton? Evolutionary biology. I just saw him last week. He says, our next level of evolution is to recognize we're all cells in a larger organism coming together to share awareness. We're here, like I'm sharing my awareness with you, you're sharing your awareness with me. We're still two separate beings, but Bruce says there's a point where they call the synergy of awareness, where our minds connect, and there's really no difference between me and you. That's the synergy of awareness. So he says, we are not humans until we all come together and have the synergy of awareness. Then we create the superorganism called humanity. We're only humans when we create humanity. That's his overriding thesis. And that is the kind of receptor sites of Gaia itself. We kind of merge with the planet, we merge with each other, and we still have our individuality because each of us have a unique place within the cosmos to be. It's like my favorite movie besides Groundhog Day is Horton Hears a Who, right? That film? Every who in Whoville has to shout in order to be heard. And so, everyone has their own role in coming together in the oneness. Every cell in your body has its own unique function, but when we come together in oneness, Bruce says, when we're a singular organism, superorganism of humanity sharing awareness and the synergy of awareness, that's a oneness that will allow us to speak to other civilizations, interplanetary, because that's the reason they're coming here. The next level of superorganism from the ones out there that are already one conscious coming together. This is a theory, coming together with our oneness, and we merge with them in a synergy of awareness, forms the next super organism that keeps evolving like that until who knows where, you know. But that's one way of looking at evolution and coming together. And for people to be happier, I think the reason we share awareness is so you can tell me something I don't know, and we share, and then we come together. So, and then there's people who don't want to do that because they, you know, maybe they've had an unhappy childhood or something, and they want to, the individual been traumatized in some ways. And, you know, so I think if we can work through the traumas that have been infected human society and heal from that, we can realize our own compassion for people, and there won't be these corporations trying to just make money or war. You know, it's never the people that want war. It's always like the military and the government. People just want to live their lives, right? They want to raise their children, do something, decent job, have a, you know, have time to, I mean, but no, it's governments and people and political parties and all that that control it and that want, but the average person just wants to be happy and in a good way. They want to just live a regular, and now, and also be open to the infinite possibilities of creation. So
Beautiful.
I also, yes, go ahead. No, what were you going to say?
I was just saying that I love Dr. Bruce Lipton's work. I just love that you've brought his quote into it, but please continue.
I actually feel like I discovered Bruce because I read a little article about him in this little newspaper, and I sought him out and visited him and did a 3-hour interview when no one had heard of him. And I just saw him last week, and he said, "Thanks for coming to this house and putting him out into the world," because now what he's saying is so important, you know, that we are part of something bigger, and he proves this biologically. So I'm glad you like his work. But I just want to say that our destiny here is to be creators, to emulate creation as creators, and all the other things are secondary. You know, yes, people want to relax and have a good life, but I think they're here to be creative beings in whatever way that may be. For you, it's podcasting or teaching or something, but that's what I think our destiny is.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this beautiful interview that you've given us today, and just so much wisdom. There are so many nuggets in this. I feel like I'm going to listen back to this at some point and just really integrate a lot of what you've said, because I think people need to know the core message of what you've shared. It's about our evolution, about, you know, essentially what I've gained from this conversation is that making contact starts with us. Right?
Yes.
It starts with our healing, our evolution, our consciousness. And when we meet these beings at the level of love vibration and of frequency that they're vibrating at, that is the contact, right?
Yes, making contact with ourselves, with each other, with the earth. And what's beyond the earth is all levels and levels of making contact. And we have to start with making contact internally in order to make it out externally. So thank you for summing it up that way. I mean, I don't feel like I've said anything new or original. I think, doesn't everybody know this? I feel like, you know.
Well, Alan, I think
Obvious.
they don't. And this is the question I ask myself so often, because sometimes I feel like the pathway is so simple and so clear, and yet we ask ourselves the question, well, if everyone has innate wisdom, if everyone has the capacity to heal, if everyone has truth, knowledge, and wisdom inside of them, well, why aren't we acting that way? Why aren't we seeing that? Why is there war, suffering, disease on the planet? And I think that's the journey, right? So to answer your question, no, everybody doesn't know that. And this is why we're having this podcast, and this is why you're sharing with us again and again and again this powerful but simple message.
Well, I think I need to listen to it too, because I think I still need to learn a lot. I feel like there's so much, you know, I need to be much more conscious, aware. I need to be present. I mean, you know, we fall in even habits with each other or automatic behavior or whatever. we're working through. So, I may say this, but I'm also saying because I need to know this as well. But I am passionate that, we are, if we can educate each other and ourselves, that the world can be a really fantastic place of happiness, prosperity, love, joy, creativity, abundance, all that. That is, me and John Lennon, imagine all the people living for
Yeah.
today.
Yes.
So I know it's possible. It's each of us have to do the work to keep polishing the bowl, as they say in Buddhism. Not that I'm a Buddhist, but yes. Thank you for your time, Eesha.
Wonderful.
Okay.
That was just an incredible conversation. So for anyone who's listening in today, if you enjoyed the conversation, please give us a like, a share, tag your friends who would love it. And also go check out Alan Steinfeld's book, Making Contact. There will be a lot of gems of wisdom in there. Thank you so much for listening, everyone.